Okay, so in the last video, we did derive this thing called the LM curve, and it's once again, even though it's tempting to think of it as a supply curve, it is not. It is a collection of points, which for a given money supply um, and output and interest rates are imply um, equilibrium in money markets. So the idea is that if we are along this curve for a given interest rate and income or output, um, money supply is equal to money demand. Now we should mention that if we are on the up here on this curve, on this side of the curve, lit to the left and above, that means that the money supply is greater than money demand. What that really means in terms of an individual is that individuals are holding more money than they desire, and what they want to do is they want to divest themselves of some of this money, and they instead want to be buying bonds. So that will bring the interest rate down, and that will bring about a more favorable position for borrowers, of course. And then on the other side of the tracks here, when we are below and to the right, money demand is greater than money supply. So that means that people will be looking for more money, and they'll be switching out of bonds. They'll be, in a sense, they'll be selling their bonds. They'll be abandoning their lending position altogether, and that's going to drive interest rates up until we get to this curve. So that's the idea. Now, okay, we do want to think about what happens when there's intervention in the money markets, and that means that the central bank steps in and increases or decreases the money supply. So you can see that this is, we'll call this monetary policy intervention, but we call it shifts in money supply, and we're thinking of this as in terms of one percentage terms, in terms of the initial money supply. So let's do that here. Let's do a 1% increase in the money supply here. We're going to put it in this cream colored cell, and as you might imagine, you're going to see a shift in this blue curve, and there you go, and you see the shift in the blue curve. So now we started off with a higher rate of interest, but with an increase in the money supply. That means that money markets now have to equilibrate at a new lower rate of interest. And by the way, I want to emphasize that here we're holding prices fixed. Everything, prices are fixed, okay? We haven't gotten to, this is a legitimate thing to do in the short run, is to keep prices fixed. Ultimately, we will relax that assumption, but even then, the qualitatively, the analysis is going to be the same. Now, over here on the LM, we see a rightward shift of the LM curve, and that shouldn't surprise you, because now that when we've increased money supply, that means that that at a new higher money supply, at every level of output, we'll now have lower rates of interest. Now let's just do the opposite. Let's suppose that we have a decrease in money supply, and you can see that we had a shift here, and that corresponds to a leftward shift of the LM curve. Okay, so we can do that. There's one last little experiment that you should know about, and that is that importantly, money demand can shift for reasons other than income. We call these autonomous shifts to money demand. Okay, so central bankers like to think about that on a day-to-day or a month-to-month basis, there are fluctuations in the liquidity requirements of firms. Okay, so and this has been actually something that has been plaguing central banks in their ability to sort of forecast what's going on, because people have been able to shift, they've been more flexible. The technology has made it more flexible for firms and individuals to go back and forth between different forms of wealth, and sometimes you can see shifts in the demand for liquidity that have nothing really to do with income or output, but nonetheless would put pressures on the interest rate. So for example, you can see that you have, let's suppose that we have an increase in money demand. Okay, so let's say it's 1%. Okay, and you will probably imagine that this curve, this red curve, is going to shift out, and that's exactly right. But remember, this is not having to do with income. Income here is on the horizontal axis. Unfortunately, looks like we left off a label here, but this is income and this is the interest rate here. So you saw a leftward shift. So now, does that confusing? It potentially it could be, because typically when you think of an increase in demand, you want to think of an increase in anything as a rightward shift. But in this case, this is an increase in money demand, and it's sort of the opposite of an increase in money supply. If you had an increase in money supply, you would see a rightward shift of the LM curve. But actually here you'll see when you have an increase in money demand, you will have to have a leftward shift in the LM curve. Okay, and then just for completeness, we're going to do the opposite direction, a reduction in money demand, once again unrelated to income. And you could think that there are other things going on in the economy, other disturbances, and you'll see that we have lower interest rates or a rightward shift in the LM curve. So in any event, hopefully we've either between this video and this tool, and also the material, other materials, you've gotten a good solid hold on what the LM curve is, because now we're going to be next video we're going to be putting things together. Thank you very much.